Hollywood promised glamour, but behind the red carpets lie secrets buried deep in forgotten files. A mysterious leak from the Los Angeles archives has revealed shocking autopsy reports of Golden Age legends, pages that whisper of unexplained substances, hidden surgeries, and lives consumed by fame. We're not here to claim conspiracies, only to uncover the records and the voices that remain. What really happened behind Hollywood's perfect smile? Stay tuned, because the truth is colder than the spotlight. Number 1. Marlon Brando, the Godfather, behind the mask. When Marlon Brando appeared on screen, the world held its breath. His voice was thunder wrapped in silk, his eyes fierce enough to silence a room. He wasn't just an actor. He was a force that rewrote the rules of Hollywood. But when the autopsy report from 2004 surfaced, it revealed a very different picture, not of a cinematic god, but of a man who spent his final years locked in a quiet battle with his own body. Doctors were stunned by what they saw. The once powerful figure of Don Corleone now weighed far more than his frame could bear. His liver was damaged. His lungs scarred his heart, struggling to keep rhythm. Hidden beneath the surface were long surgical scars across his chest and abdomen, evidence of multiple secret operations he never spoke about. One medical worker described it as a map of pain. Brando, the man who once commanded the screen with raw strength, had spent his last years in seclusion. He avoided cameras, hiding his declining health behind oversized suits and dark glasses. Insiders later confirmed that he had undergone several private procedures to fight diabetes and heart disease, always in silence, never for sympathy. For him, pride was the final armor. Even in illness, Brando remained a mystery. Friends said he was haunted by fame, burdened by the weight of his legend. He despised Hollywood's illusion, yet was forever bound to it. In the autopsy room, that contradiction was laid bare, a body marked by struggle belonging to a man who had lived every moment on his own terms. Number 2. Paul Newman, the blue-eyed legend, who glowed until the end. Paul Newman wasn't just a movie star. He was the definition of cool. With those icy blue eyes, a sly grin, and a quiet confidence that made every scene unforgettable, he embodied charm itself. But when the truth behind his passing emerged in 2008, the image of Hollywood's golden man revealed something deeper, a story of endurance, consequence, and grace in the face of time. For decades, Newman's signature look included a cigarette in films on set, even during interviews. It was the symbol of toughness in mid-century America, and no one made it look better. Yet what audiences didn't see was the cost. When doctors examined his body, they found lungs as dark as coal, their tissue hardened from years of smoke. The coroner compared them to a miner's lungs, so thick with tar they barely moved. His liver and kidneys had been strained for years, working overtime to filter the damage. Still, Newman never complained, never sought sympathy. He continued acting racing cars and supporting charities with a quiet strength that inspired millions. Friends said he knew his health was declining, but he refused to let it define him. "If I'm still standing," he once joked, "I might as well keep moving." His final wish was simple, to be remembered not just for the roles he played, but for the difference he made. And when the autopsy details reached the public, it wasn't scandal or shock that followed, it was reflection. Fans around the world realized that the same man who made smoking look glamorous had also paid the price, and his final message was clear. Even legends are not invincible. Number 3. Marilyn Monroe, the perfect scene that felt too perfect. It was a warm August night in 1962 when the world's brightest star went dark. Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's golden goddess, was found lifeless in her Brentwood home, one hand resting gently on the telephone as if she were about to call for help. Outside, flashing sirens painted the quiet street in red and blue. Neighbors whispered police pushed through the locked door, and a reporter from the Los Angeles Times murmured, "Everything looks staged." When the autopsy results came out, shock spread like wildfire. The coroner discovered barbiturate levels in her system high enough to knock down an elephant, but her stomach was completely empty. No pill fragments, no residue, nothing. The lead examiner, Dr. Thomas Noguchi, nicknamed the coroner to the stars, wrote a single chilling line. "This cannot be explained by orally ingested pills." Speculation exploded. Was it a cover-up or something darker? Some whispered that the substances were injected to leave no trace. Others pointed toward the powerful men who once filled Marilyn's private life, including the Kennedy brothers. One journalist later revealed she kept a red diary supposedly filled with secrets that could have shaken Washington itself. And then suddenly, she was gone. But beyond the mystery, there was the tragedy of a woman crushed beneath her own image. The autopsy revealed more than numbers. It told the story of exhaustion, loneliness, and impossible pressure. Marilyn wasn't just a symbol of beauty. She was the proof that fame can turn love into isolation and success into silence. That night in Brentwood marked more than a death. It was the end of an illusion, the moment when Hollywood's brightest light reminded the world that perfection often hides the deepest pain. Number 4. James Dean, the beautiful rebel who drove into legend. On a crisp September evening in 1955, California's Highway 46 echoed with the roar of a silver Porsche 550 Spider. Two bold words were painted on its side, "Little Bastard." Behind the wheel sat James Dean, Hollywood's most electrifying young star, a rebel whose piercing eyes seemed to challenge the world itself. Moments later, the night cracked with a violent collision. Metal-twisted headlights shattered, and the dream of a new kind of movie hero was frozen in time. When his body arrived at the San Luis Obispo morgue, the report stunned everyone. His neck was broken, his chest crushed, and his face so damaged that even seasoned forensic workers gasped. One coroner compared it to the aftermath of a bomb test, not because of any crime, but because of the sheer force of impact. Yet what emerged from those cold pages was not just the story of a tragic crash, but of a private life hidden behind Hollywood's brightest lights. Dean wasn't only the bad boy of Rebel Without a Cause. Off-camera, he was sensitive, restless, searching. Letters and whispered stories hinted at friendships and private relationships with some of the most powerful names in the industry. Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, even Warner Brothers. Golden Boy Tab Hunter. His close confidant, William Bast, later wrote, "Jimmy didn't care about labels, he cared about feeling alive and less alone." After the crash, studio officials reportedly moved quickly to retrieve Dean's personal papers, photos, and journals from his apartment, as though trying to preserve an image untouched by vulnerability. Newspapers headlined the shocking accident, but fans sensed there was more, a gifted young man forced to play two roles, the defiant screen idol and the guarded soul behind closed doors. Number 5. Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed queen whose heart couldn't rest. When Elizabeth Taylor entered a room, the world seemed to pause. Those famous violet eyes, her dazzling diamonds, and the air of untouchable glamour made her Hollywood's ultimate queen. But when the final curtain fell in 2011, the truth revealed in the autopsy room told a story that even Hollywood couldn't script, one of beauty pain and an unbreakable fight for survival. Doctors found her heart enlarged, nearly twice its normal size, its walls stiff and scarred. Traces of more than 30 surgeries marked her body, brain operations, intestinal repairs, even an experimental bone marrow transplant. Her liver showed the toll of decades of medication, her kidneys weak and worn. One coroner later described her body as a battlefield of scalpels and scars. Each mark told a story, not of vanity, but of a woman who refused to give up. Behind the glamour, Elizabeth lived through storms few ever knew. The pressures of fame, health struggles, and the heartbreak of love after love, 8 marriages, countless rumors and whispers of a private tenderness she never dared to speak publicly. Friends said she often hid her pain behind laughter and diamonds, turning vulnerability into grace. Even near the end, when her health was fading, she never stopped showing the poise of a true star. On camera, she remained radiant. Off camera, she was a fighter facing every surgery and every challenge with courage that inspired millions. The autopsy didn't just reveal a failing heart. It exposed a spirit that had given everything to her craft, to her causes, and to the people she loved. Number 6, Judy Garland, the girl who carried the rainbow too long. For millions around the world, Judy Garland will always be Dorothy, the wide-eyed girl singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." But behind that magical voice was a child who never truly got to be one. The world saw a star. Hollywood saw a product. And the pressures she faced from that moment on would follow her for life. From the time she was barely a teenager, studio executives controlled her every move. To keep her energy high for long shooting days, she was given pills to stay awake. To help her sleep afterward, she was given more pills. For the sake of fame, she lived on a schedule no young performer could survive for long. Yet Judy smiled for the cameras, sang her heart out, and gave audiences everything they hoped for, never revealing how exhausted she was inside. By her later years, the damage had already been done. Her body had grown fragile, her health unstable, and the relentless pace of performing had left deep scars. When her passing was reported in 1969, fans mourned the loss of a voice that had shaped generations. But the truth that emerged later wasn't about scandal, it was about compassion. Doctors confirmed years of stress exhaustion and overdependence on medications that had once been prescribed just to help her function as a working star. At her memorial in New York, over 20,000 fans gathered to sing the song that had first made her famous. Some cried, some smiled, because they understood now that Judy's Rainbow was never just a song. It was a wish, a dream of peace, rest, and freedom from the endless demands of perfection. Number 7. Natalie Wood, the star, who vanished beneath the waves. Natalie Wood was Hollywood's golden dream, radiant, talented, and adored since childhood. From Miracle on 34th Street to West Side Story, she grew up on screen, transforming from America's sweetheart into one of the most elegant women in film. But one November night in 1981, that dazzling life took a turn that left Hollywood speechless. Natalie was spending the weekend aboard her yacht, the Splendor, near California's Catalina Island. Also on board were her husband, actor Robert Wagner, and her co-star Christopher Walken. The sea was calm when the evening began, laughter, dinner, wine, but by dawn, everything had changed. Natalie was found in the water, motionless, her nightgown soaked, and her wedding ring glinting faintly under the rising sun. The official report called it an accident, but the details raised questions that have never faded. Small bruises were found on her arms and legs, marks that didn't quite fit the story of a fall. Witnesses said they heard arguing before the silence. Others remembered Natalie's lifelong fear of deep water, making it hard to believe she'd step off the boat willingly. Her husband and friends gave conflicting accounts, and soon the tabloids filled with speculation. Years later, new information led authorities to reopen the case, changing the cause of death from accidental drowning to undetermined. Yet no one could give a final answer. What happened that night remains one of Hollywood's greatest unsolved mysteries. Number 8. Frank Sinatra, the voice that echoed beyond the spotlight. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a singer, he was an era. The fedora, the tuxedo, the glass of whiskey, and that velvet voice that could melt any heart. When he sang My Way, it felt like the entire world stopped to listen. But behind the effortless charm and confident swagger was a man who carried the heavy cost of living life in the fast lane. For decades, Sinatra ruled Las Vegas and Hollywood alike. He performed late into the night, surrounded by friends, fans, and flashing lights. Cigarettes, strong drinks, and the constant pressure of fame became part of his rhythm, the price of keeping up with his own legend. Those close to him said he never truly rested. His schedule was a blur of concerts, parties, and endless travel. When the reports about his declining health surfaced in the 1990s, the public was stunned. Doctors later revealed that his lungs had hardened and blackened from years of smoking, and his heart was fighting against arteries so narrow they could barely carry blood. Even so, Sinatra refused to let weakness define him. He continued to appear on stage, cracking jokes, holding the microphone with that same old confidence and singing as if nothing had changed. After his passing in 1998, tributes poured in from around the globe. Fans gathered outside concert halls playing his records through the night. Yet the most powerful message came not from the headlines, but from his story itself, a reminder that even the strongest voices eventually grow quiet. Number 9. Steve McQueen, the king of cool and his final race. Steve McQueen was the man every audience wanted to be rugged, fearless, and effortlessly cool. From roaring engines to daring escapes, he turned danger into art. But behind that tough exterior lived a man fighting a battle he refused to lose. In the final years of his life, McQueen's greatest race wasn't on a track, it was against time itself. By 1980, his health had begun to fail. Diagnosed with a severe illness that left doctors uncertain, he searched for every possible way to heal. Hospitals in America couldn't offer him much hope, so he made a bold, desperate choice to travel quietly to Mexico for an unconventional treatment that promised one last chance. Friends said he left not in fear, but in determination, whispering, "I've still got one more fight in me." What happened next became one of Hollywood's most haunting stories. The small clinic where he sought help was nothing like the polished hospitals of Los Angeles, simple, dimly lit, but filled with people who believed in miracles. McQueen underwent surgery there, far from cameras and headlines. The effort was courageous, but his body was already too weak. Within days, the man once called the King of Cool took his final breath, surrounded only by those who had tried to save him. When the reports came out, the world was stunned. Fans couldn't believe that a man who had lived every scene full throttle had faced his last days in quiet struggle. But instead of scandal, there was admiration. McQueen's story wasn't about defeat. It was about courage. He refused to give up even when the odds were stacked against him. Number 10. Humphrey Bogart, the last goodbye to Hollywood's toughest man. For decades, Humphrey Bogart was the face of classic Hollywood. The man with the gravelly voice, a cigarette between his lips, and a look that could melt steel. From Casablanca to the Maltese Falcon, he didn't just play heroes, he defined them. But when the truth about his final days surfaced in 1957, it revealed something far more human than any role he ever played. In his later years, Bogart's health began to fade. Friends noticed the weight loss, the constant cough, but he brushed it off with a joke and another sip of whiskey. He had spent a lifetime under the spotlight, where cigarettes and drinks weren't vices, they were part of the image. Yet behind the camera, his body was paying the price. Doctors later revealed his lungs were severely damaged, and his once powerful frame had withered to less than half its former strength. When the reports were released after his passing, the details were heartbreaking, but not scandalous. His organs showed the toll of years spent pushing through exhaustion, performing through pain, and living as if time could never touch him. The man who once stood tall under Hollywood's brightest lights had faced his battles quietly, without complaint. Lauren Bacall, his wife and co-star, said it best: even when he was weak, he never let anyone see it. That was Bogey. Her words captured the truth: a man who fought with dignity, who never surrendered to pity or fear. At his farewell in New York, thousands gathered holding lit cigarettes, a silent salute to their fallen hero. It wasn't about mourning, it was about respect. Humphrey Bogart left this world as he lived on screen, strong, proud, and unforgettable. His story remains a timeless reminder that behind every legend lies a fragile heart still beating beneath the smoke and spotlight. Number 11. Clark Gable, the king whose heart carried the crown too long. Clark Gable was the man who made audiences believe in romance, strength, and charm. With that half-smile and commanding voice, he became the king of Hollywood. But by the time he filmed The Misfits in 1960, alongside Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift, the crown had grown unbearably heavy. Those who were there said the set was chaos. Monroe often arrived late, shaken and tired. Clift drowned his nerves in alcohol, and Gable, nearing 60, tried to keep the production together. He worked long days under scorching desert heat, refusing to use a stunt double, determined to prove he was still the leading man America adored. Between takes, he chain-smoked, gulped black coffee, and joked with the crew. No one realized how close his body was to breaking. Just days after filming wrapped, Gable collapsed at his Beverly Hills home. Doctors discovered the truth: his heart had swollen to nearly twice its normal size, its arteries hardened and narrow as stone. It wasn't the heart of a 59-year-old, it was the heart of a man decades older. The stress, the cigarettes, the endless pressure to stay perfect had quietly taken their toll. When news of his death spread, America froze. Walter Cronkite opened the CBS broadcast with trembling words: "A king has fallen." Fans gathered in tears outside the chapel, holding photos of Rhett Butler, the man who once said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." But behind that legendary line was a man who gave everything to his work, to his image, to the illusion that kings never grow old. Number 12. Ava Gardner, the beauty who lived like a storm. Ava Gardner wasn't just beautiful, she was breathtaking. With her dark eyes, sultry voice, and untamed spirit, she was the woman every camera fell in love with and every headline chased. But behind the glamour and diamonds was someone fighting the quiet ache of loneliness and the heavy price of fame. By the time she passed away in 1990, the woman once crowned the most beautiful in the world had lived a life few could imagine. Doctors later revealed what years of exhaustion, alcohol, and stress had done to her. Her liver bore the marks of long struggle, her lungs weakened, her heart tired from the endless rush of fame. It wasn't the result of scandal or excess, it was the toll of a life that had burned brighter than most ever dared to live. Friends remembered Ava in her later years as private, but full of fire. She would sit by a window in her London apartment, a glass in hand, playing old jazz records and laughing softly at the memories of her past. She spoke of love, of Frank Sinatra, who once nearly broke the world for her, and of Howard Hughes, the billionaire who tried to control her but never could. "Men wanted to own me," she once said. "No one ever did." When her name lights up the screen today, audiences still see that same spark, the woman who lived her life like a storm, wild, beautiful, and unforgettable. Ava Gardner didn't just make Hollywood shimmer. She reminded the world that real beauty isn't in perfection, it's in being impossible to forget. Number 13. Rita Hayworth, the goddess who forgot her own legend. Rita Hayworth was the heartbeat of 1940s Hollywood, the woman who could stop time with a single smile. In Gilda, her famous hair flip became one of the most unforgettable moments in movie history. She was the definition of glamour, adored by millions and desired by kings, actors, and audiences alike. But when the final years of her life came, the spotlight revealed something no one expected, not scandal, but heartbreak. As she aged, Rita began to change. She forgot her lines on set, missed rehearsals, and seemed lost in moments that once belonged entirely to her. Tabloids were cruel, calling her washed up or lost to alcohol. The truth, however, was far more tragic and far more human. When doctors examined her after her passing in 1987, they found that her brain had been slowly consumed by Alzheimer's disease. Decades before most people even understood it, Hollywood's brightest star had been silently fading away. Her daughter Yasmin later revealed how Rita would sometimes look into her eyes and ask softly, "Who am I?" It was the most painful question of all, a goddess of memory stripped of her own. She hadn't fallen from grace because of vanity or vice. She had been taken by an illness no one yet knew how to fight. When the truth reached the public, the tone shifted from gossip to grief. The world realized that Rita Hayworth's story wasn't about decline, it was about dignity. She faced confusion, fear, and loss with the same grace that once lit up the silver screen. Even as her mind slipped away, her beauty, kindness, and warmth remained untouched. Number 14. John Wayne, the cowboy who fought an invisible enemy. To millions, John Wayne was more than a movie star. He was America's cowboy, the symbol of courage, grit, and frontier strength. With his steady walk, gravelly voice, and unshakable stare, he became the embodiment of heroism. But when his final battle came, it wasn't fought on horseback or in a dusty western town. It was waged silently against something no bullet could ever stop. In the 1970s, Wayne's health began to fail. Doctors discovered cancer spreading through his body, first in the lungs, then to his stomach. The autopsy later revealed something few could believe: unusually high traces of radiation in his tissues. That detail took everyone back to 1954, when Wayne filmed The Conqueror in the Nevada desert, only a short distance from U.S. nuclear test sites. Back then, the government had assured the cast the area was safe. But decades later, nearly 100 people who worked on the film would fall ill with similar conditions. The revelation sent shockwaves through Hollywood. The Los Angeles Times called it the radioactive curse of a film that never should have been made. Yet through it all, Wayne never once blamed anyone. He continued to work, to smile, and to inspire. Even in his weakest moments, he carried himself like the heroes he had played, strong, determined, and full of pride. At his funeral in 1979, thousands gathered to say goodbye to the man who had come to define the American spirit. Flags flew at half-mast, cowboys wept, and old film reels flickered across television screens. The Duke had ridden into history not as a man defeated by illness, but as one who faced every challenge head-on. Number 15. Burt Lancaster, the hero with a heart of secrets. Burt Lancaster was Hollywood's golden symbol of strength, tall, magnetic, and fierce on screen. Whether he was leading a prison revolt in Birdman of Alcatraz or diving into romance in From Here to Eternity, he carried himself like a man carved from steel. But behind that commanding image was a story of quiet struggle and human fragility that only came to light after his passing in 1994. When doctors examined Lancaster's body, they found something startling. His heart was covered in scar tissue, proof of several hidden strokes he had survived in silence. Each mark was a reminder of the pain he'd endured while still smiling for cameras and audiences. Those close to him recalled moments when he'd stumble backstage or lose vision for a few seconds. Yet moments later, he'd stand tall, deliver his lines, and command the spotlight, as if nothing had happened. Why did no one know? Because in Hollywood, heroes were not allowed to appear weak. Lancaster's team kept his condition private, afraid that the public would never accept a vulnerable version of their Iron Man. But that secrecy came with a cost. Behind the applause and awards, he lived with constant exhaustion and the fear of being exposed not just for his health, but for the complexity of his private life. Rumors swirled about hidden relationships and quiet loneliness, stories of a man torn between his public strength and private battles. Yet what truly defined Burt Lancaster was his resilience. Even as his heart weakened, he kept performing, mentoring, and giving everything he had to his art.